Thank you, Nicholas. Now, welcome to our Community Church Unitarian Universalist. I'm your worship associate, Sally Michelle Jackson, and it is a joy to be with you in person and virtually. So, who are we as Community Church? We're a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Please look to your weekly email for announcements. I will do one quick announcement. Don't leave right after the service. This is our annual meeting. Here you have. This is a poem written by Hannah Roberts Villeneuve. It's called A Protest and a Party. People sometimes ask, is pride a protest or a party? And the answer is, of course, yes. And why not? Why not rejoice as we resist, dance as we demand change, celebrate as we create community that delights in all of who we are? So bring all of that with you this morning. Bring your policy demands. Bring your glitter. Bring your Supreme Court broken heart. Bring your rainbow socks. Bring the emptiness you feel for our siblings gone too soon. Bring your Gloria Estefan remix. Bring your tender hope for change. Bring your most garish eyeshadow. Bring your spirit tattered and battered by a world that seems insistent on choosing fear and hate. Gather up all these things and bring them here to a place where we don't have to shoulder these burdens or celebrate these joys alone. Come, let us worship together. I think we do the, do you have something before the chalice lighting?
All right, light the power, y'all.
Okay. It is Community Church's custom to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth through our worship. Please join in singing, "We Light This Flame." We light this flame to open the light of truth and knowledge and the warmth of love and community and the fire of hope and commitment. All right. And now, CCUU's Religious Education Director, Cynthia Ramirez, brings us her words for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to bring you a reading in honor of Pride Month, and it's an interesting perspective, or it's called Choice. And it's by Alex Captain. And Alex Captain is a lay community minister, organizer, educator, and editor. Z is a co-leader of the Transforming Hearts Collective and the founder of Radical co-editor. I want to talk to you about choice. I want to talk about the fact that just because someone who's out to destroy you says you choose to be the way you are, does not mean the path of Beth protection is to counter with, no, I didn't. It's not a choice. I was born this way, and I've always been this way. Is who I am, my sexuality, my gender, a deep and real part of me, close to my soul? Yes. Are there choices involved? Of course there are. I have made one choice after another to feel more at ease, more vibrant, more alive. I choose the name, I choose to change my name. I choose to allow myself to open to the idea that I might be attracted to women. I choose to open myself to the idea that, first of all, genderqueer people exist. Second, that I might be one, and third, that I might be attracted to other genderqueer folks. After all of this, I choose to remain open to the idea that I am still attracted to men and might actually like being in a relationship with one. If I hadn't made these choices, I never could have lived into my full, authentic self. And you know, there are some things that are more attracted to me than gender. I'm attracted to feminists, I'm attracted to queer people, and radicals. I'm attracted to people who are assertive and like to make decisions. And is any of this biologically hardwired into me? Probably not. Is all of it impacted by culture? Definitely. But do I have every right to pursue relationships and experiences with whoever I want because it's my body and my sexuality? Yes. It doesn't matter who I seek intimacy, joy, and camaraderie with. My sexuality is sacred. Love is sacred. And I deserve and demand the right to full control over my body and what I do with it and who I share it with. So, if anyone ever tries to invalidate you or the way you seek intimacy by saying it's just a choice, tell them choice is sacred. Tell them the inherent right of every person to have full authority and agency over choices they made about their lives and their bodies. It's spiritual and human imperative. That there is a word for this, and it's liberation. That there is nothing more worth fighting for. Tell them that in your faith tradition, we don't love people despite their differences or because they can't help being different. We love people because of their differences and because diversity enriches our world and our communities. Tell them that in the final reckoning, there is only one choice that will be judged, and that's your choice. Tell them you hope they choose love. Thank you.
Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members' and friends' generosity helps us to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at ccunola.org/stewardship/ or by text at 504-370-2659, text GIVE. You can also send a check to CCUU at 6690 Fleur de Lis Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana 70124, and you can give in person. Please come forward during our musical offertory. If you are unable to come forward, raise your hand and we'll come to you. Thank you.
All right, everybody, this one's to the tune of Deep in the Heart of Texas. So, okay, ready?
Nicholas, can I do the litany first?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. We're going to do a litany for pride, and your response is printed in your order of service, but it's easy to remember. May we live the spirit of pride. I'll point to you when it's your turn. With gratitude for the freedom to be our true, authentic selves, may we live the spirit of pride. With the courage that comes from challenging our own fears, may we live the spirit of pride. With sorrow for all those who could not be with us today, and in honor of those who died of AIDS or who lost their lives to hate and homophobia, may we live the spirit of pride. With grief for all those whose pain was unbearable and who left us far too soon, may we live the spirit of pride. Looking ahead to the justice still withheld, may we live the spirit of pride. With the confidence that a sense of community banishes isolation and loneliness, may we live the spirit of pride. With courage to resist the rising tides of injustice sweeping around us, may we live the spirit of pride. With the rainbow flag flying high and a sense of beloved community among us and the joy that comes from making new connections, may we all live the spirit of pride. Okay.
Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you are online, please write your joys and sorrows in the comments section to be read aloud. If you're in person, there are cards of joys and sorrows in our foyer. If you were not able to fill out one earlier, please feel free to do so during our musical interlude, and we thank you.
Let's do Love Forever for the musical interlude. Mariana, Love Forever. You got it? Oh, no. Love Forever. That's before Red Rose.
Did anybody have any joys and sorrows they wanted to? Oh, okay, got one coming up here. And I have one here. Here we go. All right, thank you. This is from Bill Fernandez. It is so nice and a true joy to see so many people here today and hear a choir. It's been too long. Thank you. That's okay, you can applaud. Huh? Oh, okay. It is a great joy that this week, together with New Orleans, will receive a $500,000 grant for Crescent Care on Elysian Fields. It will be the second grant to provide solar power and batteries to Crescent Care to provide medical care. That's from Kathy Lauren. Thank you. Are there any others that anybody just thought of? Okay.
I just wanted to thank Kathy and the board and the people that stepped up and got us through this year and got us a minister and got us all legal. I'm very thankful.
Okay. For those of you listening online that may not have been able to hear Liz, she is thankful for all of the people, the board, Kathy Larimer, and all of the people that help keep us together through this time and get us a new minister. So we'll be looking forward to Stacy being here on a regular basis. All right. Oh, we're going to light 2 more candles. one for the joy still bubbling up too new to share, and one for the sorrows that we cannot yet put into words. Know that we have you and hold you in our hearts.
Our words for meditation this morning come from my colleague, Victoria Safford. People ask me sometimes, is yours a gay church? And it's a privilege for me to answer, ours is absolutely, gladly, hopefully, and humbly, gaily a gay church, a gay tradition where everyone, including heterosexual members and friends, is welcome, where everyone is needed, where everyone's experience is cherished as a sacred text, because no one person's experience of living or loving can be comprehensive, because each of us holds clues that others need in order to live with dignity and joy as a human person. And none of us knows enough about that yet to be considered whole. It is absolutely a gay church, even as ours is a gay world, if you would look around. Gay church, straight church, people's church, a human congregation made holy by the holy hopes and fears and dreams of all who wish to come. Come in, we say. Come out. Come in. We're all in this together. I will not speak of tolerance with its courteous clenched teeth and bitter resignation. I will not speak about acceptance of other people and some other kind of lifestyle. I can only look on in laughing wonder at human life in all its wondrous incarnations. I can taste only in passing the breath of the Spirit of life on my mouth and understand our common longing to breathe in deep, deep gulps of it. I cannot think of being anybody else's ally, because even that implies some degree of separation, some degree of safety for some of us, but not all. We are allied with no one and with nothing but love. The larger love transcending all our understanding, within which all the different, differing, gorgeously variant, beautifully deviant aspects of ourselves are bound in elegant unity. I know that on some sad and disappointing days, these words describe the church that yet shall be, and not the church that is. I know. But I know too that to answer is an act of creation. To answer this question and some others is a privilege, a prophetic imperative, a joy, a duty, and a holy sacrament. Let us have a few minutes of just complete and utter silence for us to be with our thoughts, our prayers, our reflections, and think about the words that you have heard. Amen, Ashe, Shalom, Salam, Namaste, blessed be. In the interest of time and honoring our hour together, I'm going to skip the reading before the sermon. But if anybody wants to read it, you can contact me by email and I'll be happy to send it to you. This is the month of the anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion in New York City in 1969. And thus, the month of June was designated Pride Month for LGBTIQ people by President Bill Clinton in 1999 and honored by most, but not all, subsequent presidents. For this 53rd anniversary, in a time of renewed calls against full equal rights for LGBTIQ people, and with special negative attention focused on transgender people, with legislators in Ohio passing a law requiring genital inspection of child athletes in order to keep out transgender girls. This is a most timely service. And I wanted to share with you who we have to thank for having a Pride Month at all. Some of you may already know the story, but many others may not. Late Friday night, June 27th, 1969, some people use the date June 28th since the event continued well after midnight. 8 officers from the so-called public morals section of the New York City Police Department pulled up in front of the Stonewall Inn, one of the city's largest and most popular gay bars located on Christopher Street in the East Greenwich Village. At the time, vice squads in large cities, New Orleans as well as New York, routinely raided gay bars. It was an easy way to boost arrest statistics. Patrons always complied with the police, frightened by the prospect of being identified by name in the newspaper and cowed by the frequent beatings with no legal recourse. But this night was different. Earlier, it had been announced that Judy Garland, a gay icon, had died. The Stonewall Inn was packed with people, a few even honoring Judy by wearing her trademark black fedora. Now, I don't know what you think of when I say that the Stonewall was a gay bar. Maybe you're picturing a wood-paneled bar with hanging baskets of ferns, with a lot of really good-looking young white men dressed in the style of Esquire or GQ magazine models. Okay, there were places like that in the village in the 1960s, but the Stonewall was not one of them. The Stonewall Inn was a haven for queers, masculine-looking women and feminine-looking men who dressed in gender-bending style, many of whom were people of color and Latinx. They gathered at the mafia-owned Stonewall because they were not welcome at the other gay bars on Christopher Street. In New York, as in New Orleans, a lot of bars that were a haven for things that were deemed immoral, like gambling or gay people, were owned by the mafia. When the cops busted in on that fateful night, this time, the femi boys and butchy girls who made up the Stonewall's clientele fought back. They took on the cops, maybe in part because their sadness at an idol's early death related to their own situations and so easily turned into anger. Maybe because their meager, cheesy sanctuary had been invaded once too often. Maybe, like Rosa Parks in 1955, they were just tired of being oppressed. Whatever the multiple causes, the patrons of the Stonewall Inn had had enough. If the cops had expected another easy bust of what they called Marys and Fairies, they were quickly disabused. No one can say now exactly what happened in all that chaos. Everyone agrees that it began with one young drag queen clobbering her arresting officer, but whether this was with a beer bottle or a high-heeled pump is still in dispute. It soon escalated into a full-fledged rebellion with all the bar's patrons, estimated to be about 200 people packed in there, joining in and spilling out onto Christopher Street and involving many of the nearly 1,000 people out on the street. The embarrassed NYPD officers had to call for backup for raiding a gay bar. You don't think they were embarrassed? It took hours and hours to quiet Christopher Street. 4 policemen suffered minor injuries. 13 people were arrested. Despite the chaos, nearly everyone agrees that the very first blow for freedom was struck by Sylvia Rivera. At that time, a 17-year-old Puerto Rican-American transgender woman in full makeup and wearing 6-inch spike heels. In an interview later, she was asked why she had taken that swing at the policeman, and she replied in her characteristic intense style, "I was fighting for my life." And thus, modern gay activism was born, sparking a nationwide revolution, and a hidden subculture was transformed into a vibrant political and cultural movement. The frustration felt by the genderqueer or trans community, and I have to point out, neither term was even in existence at the time of the Stonewall Rebellion, was at a fever pitch. Homophobia in New York City, as elsewhere, was institutionalized, normal, and perfectly legal. It was against the law for any man or woman to publicly dress in clothing of the other sex. And most patrol officers extended this to the wearing of makeup, subjecting face queens, men who wore makeup while wearing men's clothing, to humiliating and abusive forced public face washings and beatings. Bars that catered to the openly different were refused liquor licenses as an affront to public morals, which is at least one of the reasons why the other gay bars on Christopher Street in those days insisted on normal dress for their patrons. It was not at all unusual for masculine-looking lesbians to be raped, and not only by street thugs, but also by police officers. It goes without saying that there were no openly gay police officers, and probably very few closeted. It was difficult to get housing and almost impossible to get jobs in the straight world. The media routinely used ugly, disparaging terms for BGLTIQ people. One report of the rebellion in the New York Daily News on July 6, 1969, had this ugly headline: "Homo nest raided, queen bees stinging mad." There was no point about making a complaint about any of it. There was nobody to complain to, and nothing would be done even if you were brave or foolish enough to make a complaint. Now, even with all this as a given, New York City was still considered a haven for gay men and lesbian women from all over the country. And in the 1960s, they flocked to the East Village in the same way that Southern gays and lesbians flocked to the French Quarter, despite the rampant and violent homophobia of the NOPD. If you were white and middle class, or at least adhered to middle class values, you could join the Mattachine Society for men, or the Daughters of Bilitis for women. These organizations worked very quietly and discreetly behind the scenes to reduce and mitigate the discrimination and abuse. But both organizations suffered from white blindness and white privilege. Both frowned on expressions outside of the gender norms. Both cautioned their more flamboyant siblings that they were the ones making things bad for everybody. Now, if you think that was a thing in the 1960s, I heard this very complaint from a white cis lesbian woman in 2014 when I gave a pride service at another UU church that shall remain nameless. At first, it seemed like the Stonewall Rebellion had changed all that. Within a year of the riot, the Gay Activist Alliance was formed, and Sylvia Rivera, among others, eagerly joined. The group began pressing the New York City Hall for major reforms of both law and police practice for the passage of a local gay rights bill. Sylvia was not allowed in the negotiations. She was arrested for climbing the walls of City Hall wearing a dress and high heels to try to crash a closed-door hearing on the bill. In just a few years, the Gay Activist Alliance eliminated drag and transvestite, as they were then called, concerns from its civil rights agenda. Drag rights were also dropped from the proposed city gays' rights bill in order to make it more, acceptable. In an interview in 1995, Sylvia said, "When things started getting more mainstream, they were like, 'We don't need you no more.'" Her response was to do what she always did best: fight back. "Hell hath no fury like a drag queen scorned," Sylvia warned. With her friend, Black transgender activist Marsha P. Johnson, she always said that the P stood for Pay It No Mind, she founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, known as STAR, a radical group that did everything from marching to setting up emergency crash pads so that there would be an alternative to the streets for transgender people. Though Sylvia herself was frequently homeless, she spent the end of her life at Transy House, a direct descendant of the original STAR shelter that she helped found. Throughout her troubled life, Sylvia saw her outreach work with the outcast Femi and Butchie street kids of New York City as her ministry. In many ways, Sylvia Rivera was the Rosa Parks of the modern transgender movement, a term that wasn't even coined until 2 decades after Stonewall. But her work remains sadly unfinished today. In a moving tribute written after Sylvia's death in 2002, Ricky Wilchins, executive director of the Gender Public Advocacy Coalition, wrote, "The earlier expulsion of transvestites by GAA was a harbinger of things to come. Federal gay rights legislation pending in Congress doesn't mention gender expression or identity, nor does the gay rights bill pending in Albany. In effect, gender has become the new gay, the thing you can't talk about in polite or political company. The evil Sylvia Rivera fought so valiantly against was gender stereotyping, and it's the most persistent and pernicious form of heterosexism. Gender stereotyping forces everybody into rigid gender boxes, regardless of your affectional preference. It is held in place not by laws, but by custom, culture, expectation, and tradition. There's an expectation that human beings only come in a male and female binary, and there are strict rules for each, including rigid rules of dress, including what colors are okay, speech, behavior, lifestyle, and most of us, intentionally or not, consciously or not, help enforce these norms. Children and adolescents are the most at risk, the most vulnerable. Woe to the sissy boys and the tomboy girls who are prime targets for emotional and physical abuse during those years when fitting in with your peers is the be-all and end-all of life. And now adults are getting into the abuse of these children. We have made so many gains in our country since 1969. Urban police departments can no longer openly target perceived gays and lesbians. Now they need to find an excuse. Most urban police forces include openly gay and lesbian officers. For the most part, mainstream media, obviously I'm excluding Spock's, okay, avoids insulting terms for BGLTIQ people. We gained equal marriage rights, but now we have legitimate fears that the current ultra-conservative Supreme Court will overturn Obergefell and return same-sex marriage, like abortion, to the states. I think we all know how that will go in Louisiana. For us as religious liberals, the question is, what do we do? Trans activist Barbara Judith compared the situation of transgender people to the mainstream civil rights movement, and I believe the analogy is apt. In the 1960s and 70s, UU churches were open to certain people of color, those who dressed like us and thought like us, and if they could fit in, and if there weren't too many of them, they were welcome. And only the few of the most radical UU churches even considered calling a black minister. I remember when I was serving a church early in my ministry in the early 90s, again, church will remain nameless, a black family from New Orleans who I had been joshing with in town came to church, and the members of the church thought they were being welcoming. They told the family that the next time they came, they wouldn't have to be so dressed up, and they told them they wouldn't need to bring their Bibles, and the little girls were not allowed to participate in the day's activities in the Sunday school because they had on Sunday best, and the day's activities in Sunday schools was a water balloon fight. Did that family come back? Today, many UU churches, many, not all, have gone through the training and have become proudly welcoming congregations to BGLTIQ people. But is it once again a case of allowing in only those who fit in, who seem perhaps to fit a stereotype we might not even known we were carrying? Is there a number limit on how many BGLTIQ people we will welcome before we get uncomfortable? It's important to remember that June is also the sad anniversary month of the fire at the Upstairs Lounge, a gay bar in the French Quarter in 1973. 32 people were killed that awful night. In a city packed with churches, only 3 hosted memorial services. St. George Episcopal on St. Charles Avenue, the rector was formally reprimanded by his bishop. St. Mark's Methodist Church on Rampart Street, and Wikipedia says, a Unitarian church. And I have been unable to discover which one. That would be interesting to know. In the 1980s, the question of whether or not the church would sponsor a table at one of the first gay pride celebrations in New Orleans nearly cost Reverend Mike McGee his ministry at First Church. It was not too many years ago that Community Church took the bold, inclusive step labeling restrooms for the gender a person identified with, and somebody vandalized the doors. It was not too many years ago that I had a conversation with a UU who told me that they were very uncomfortable, that talking at church about human rights for BGLTIQ people made them feel like it was being shoved in their face and made them feel that their church was changing too much. I was glad for that member's frankness, and I wondered how many UUs felt the same way, but didn't want to say it out loud. As people of faith, as religious liberals, if we are to be true to our values and principles, these questions are worth asking. How important are differences? Is our church working to become more welcoming to all people? Can we think outside the box, outside all the boxes? Can we allow ourselves to be enriched and enlarged by people who seem outside our usual norms? Why do we have unusual norms anyway? And what gifts and talents and ideas and opportunities are we losing if we decide we're too uncomfortable? As always in these situations, I, as merely your temporary consulting minister, I have a lot of questions. But you, as the congregation, you are the ones with the answers. May those answers be based in our values and our hopes and our dreams, and not on our prejudices and our fears and our discomforts. So might this be. Amen, Ashe, Shalom, Salam, Namaste, blessed be. Our benediction comes from UU Cricket Hall. May the drag stage rise to meet you. May the world rise to accept and embrace you. May the rainbow of love enfold you. May your fluidity never be hindered. May your pronouns always be supported and your dead name forgotten. May those you invite into your life remain loyal. May your chosen family lift you up and catch and catch and catch you when you need it. May you be able to catch others when they need it. May you remember that sensitivity is not weakness, but instead a great strength welling up inside you. And until we meet again, may you remember that you are loved and you are forever divine. Go from here and make justice in order to make peace.